as one of the engagements were there at the Senate earlier today. Tonight, our attention is going to be first on the economy before I bring in my next second guest on the program. But first, let's tackle the issue of the economy. And I have a former minister, he served 2 times as minister, first as a minister of the national planning, then minister of finance. He worked at the CBN. He's been a member of the board of several banks. This man has put together a book he edited and also wrote. The book is titled Public Policy and Agent Interest, Perspective from the Emerging World. Some insights on the proper way on how the public office, the public institutions, and governance should be administered. A lot of very eminent personalities who put pen to paper in putting this book together. Dr. Shamsuddin Usman is my first guest on the program tonight, and he's live for us in our Abuja studio. It's good to see you again after such a long time, former minister. Thank you so much indeed for your time tonight.
Thank you, Sheung, for having me. Yes, long time no see, but I see you every day on your program.
All right. Thank you so much for joining us. I would drag you out for a moment in the sense that I like to know how your mind works. When you handle the economy, as a former minister of the finance, the indices are totally different. And reading through this book on my flight today, I looked at a whole lot of the standards and some of the things that a lot of your friends who contributed to this book, and I'm wondering, why does it seem that a lot of people, when they're in public office, things are perhaps a bit more different to handle, and they see it differently when they get out of office? Why does it look so much that they cannot speak their minds when they're in office, but when they get out, the thoughts are freer?
Well, I think it's not that things are different. I remember during one of my confirmations as a minister, somebody, a senator, asked me, I don't want to mention his name, not to embarrass him, said that, look, Shamsuddin, when you are in the private sector, you used to be very critical of government. You are always on the TV, newspapers, and criticizing things and showing things how they should be done. But now you are in government, we don't see you doing that. And the answer I gave him was actually quite simple. I said, look, at the time that I was then as minister, and even now, I have access to literally all the top people in power, especially as a minister of finance or national planning. I could walk into the president's office, I can walk into the vice president's office, I can walk into the Senate president's office, and so on and so forth. I had access to everybody. So why go public when in fact you can influence policy and decisions much more if you actually either do it in committees or in cabinet, or in fact face to face, where sometimes it's even easier. You can communicate certain things. So really, I think it's not a question of either the issues are different or people are afraid to speak. At least from my own experience, that was really the issue. In fact, if I don't, Senator Deti Baba Ahmed was the one who asked me that question during one of my Senate confirmation, and that's the answer I gave him. So really, I don't see things being different. It's just the communication. In this particular case, having left office about, since 2013, I had mulled the idea of writing a book, particularly in terms of what have been my experiences when in government, what were some of the things that we tried to tackle, how successful were we, and how unsuccessful were we, so that it will be more like a lesson either to people who are on seat now or people who are coming. And also an enlightenment to the public.
So, Dr. Usman,
yes.
So it then brings me to the question. This chapter was the one that, chapter 15, was one that really got my attention. And is one that's a chapter that prompted this, my very first question to you. Why People deal with governance differently when they are in and out of office. So you title that particular article, you says, the highs and lows of implementing public policy, some tidbits, including a couple of scary moments. One of the things that you said that makes it a bit difficult and not straightforward to be able to implement public policy, one of it is politics. One of it is the complicacy or the complication of the constitution. And you also talked about the Yaradua era and some of the politics that played out. Now, and those who think that we are probably doomed. We have some of the best persons in the country. As soon as they get into public office, it does look like it is absolutely impossible to fix the problems of this country. What would you be able to tell us, as someone who has served at that highest level, who has served in the public sector? Is there a major spiritual crisis in implementing public policy, or how can we really achieve change in public office?
I think it's a very good question, particularly relevant to your program. In fact, Politics Today, that's why when this was mentioned, I was quite happy to come here. And it ties in even with the conclusion of the book that I can mention later. But directly answering your question, the thing is, if you come in, whether as a technocrat, as an economist, and so on, there are a lot of things you try to do. But the political system is set in such a way that is very, very difficult to get things done properly. And I think, in fact, that is the title of the book and the theme, which is the issue of agent interest. Public servants have been put there to actually protect public interest. But unfortunately, for many public servants, for the majority of public servants, whether they are politicians, whether they are members of the National Assembly, whether they are in the executive, whether they are civil servants, for a lot of people, their own personal interests tend to overtake the public interest. And therefore, instead of being agents for the public to protect public interests, they become principals because it is their own interests that are prime. Now, I gave those examples of, for example, the day I was appointed minister, somebody, alerted me that, hey, for you to get confirmed as a minister, you have to register as a member of a political party. Of course. So really, I had to rush to Kano because as of that time, I was not a member of any political party. I had to rush to Kano to my ward and register so as to, and then there are all sorts of requirements by the Senate before you can get confirmed and so on. But I think those tidbits I gave was to highlight the fact that the life of a minister is never simple, straightforward, go to the office, get the job done. No, there are always, and unfortunately, this is part of the problem. Political issues that you have to handle, scheming. I gave several examples in the book of a time, for example, during one of my confirmations in the Senate, when a couple of senators from my state decided that they were not going to support my confirmation, simply for political reasons. Somebody set them up to do that. And I was going to face some serious embarrassment. The president had nominated me, and yet senators from my state were reluctant to. And it took quite a bit of work to get over that. In fact, when I was also, the first time I was appointed Minister of Finance, I went to Kano and they had a party for me, business people and so on. So the first thing you learn as a minister, in fact, you have to know how to, especially if you are not a politician, how to manage the territory. Because, I said something innocently that became the issue in the news for several days in Kano. I said, which was something that happened, that everybody was running after me at that time, learning that I was Minister of Finance, and already bringing proposals to me as to what issues they were pursuing, mostly personal. Either had some contract they were looking for, or in fact, the first person that visited me after my swearing in getting back to the office was a lady, a politician from Kano, who brought a list of 9 containers and said, Minister, congratulations. You are the chairman of the Board of Customs. Please help me to clear these ones. Now, it was from her that I even learned I was the chairman of the Board of Customs. You know, so there's a lot of that sort of turbulent times that you have to actually.
Yeah. So
yes,
and I think what you are saying tonight will give illuminate the minds of a lot of Nigerians why we have a lot of public officers who are successful in their private life, but they are failures when they get to public office. If you are president today, and that those who are raising question, and today, for example, the presidency is hinting on a possible, imminent cabinet reshuffle. If anyone in public office were to be successful, what should a person do?
Well, first of all, you must be diligent. You must be somebody who understands your job. That's very, very important. Yes, the politics is there, but if you are Minister of Finance and you don't understand the economy, then that's going to be a serious challenge. If you are Minister of Health and you don't understand the health sector, so the professionalism is very, very important. Yes, it's true. Sometimes just pure politicians can be put in certain ministries. That may not necessarily be a disadvantage. Though for some ministry, for example, Ministry of Justice, you have to put a lawyer, somebody who understands. But what you need to do is, first of all, be focused. There are going to be all sorts of diversions. There's going to be all sorts of tricks to get you to do the wrong things. But if you stay firm and committed, and also know what you are doing, and really stay close to the program of the president, because that's very, very critical. You are not there in your own right. You are there as an appointee of the president. And it's therefore very, very important to ensure that what you are implementing is not your own, at the end of the day, it's not your own business, but the business of the president, the business of government. And if you do that, I think you'll be very successful.
One area that caught my attention around the time that you were in office, the Steve Oronsaye report was sanctioned. And there are a lot of people who have also mentioned the reason why we are where we are today, because there's just too much Nigeria spend on sustaining or maintaining those who are in public office. And that's where the conversation around cutting the cost of governance. I'm particularly thrilled by some of the things that you wrote in chapter 6 of your book, Enhancing Transparency and Accountability in Public Financial Management, the memoirs of a practitioner. And that brings me, and that's one of the areas where I'm going to drag you out tonight, because I can't have you on the program and you will not comment on the economics or the economy of Nigeria and where we are getting it wrong, or what we need to do to get it right from your own experience. On one hand, cutting cost of governance, how difficult is it?
I think it's not difficult if you have somebody who understands what needs to be done. If you have the support of the president that appointed you, it's not, I think the big challenge, and I think we always get back to the politics of it, is that sometimes you sit down and do all the necessary work. And I'm happy you mentioned the Oronsaye report. I actually covered that in great detail in the book. The number, if you look at the number of days and weeks that we spent under the chairmanship of President Jonathan, he actually chaired a special committee of selected ministers and officials that we spent days and days and days and nights, going into that report, line by line, recommendation by recommendation, and agreeing with some, disagreeing with others, modifying some. It took weeks, and the president sat through it. We finalized it, and it came to council, I remember. Then there was supposed to be a white paper to implement it. Now, this is where then the political process tends to come in. And you find that certain vested interests then try, and I left government shortly after that, but it's a pity that up till today, in spite of that amount of work that had been done, that report has not been implemented. In fact, quite the opposite. This is again another problem. We are even creating new agencies, probably multiples of even the ones that we were supposed to be restructuring and removing and reordering in order to cut costs, in order to make government work more efficient. Another example is the electricity problem in this country. Again, under President Jonathan, he set up what was called the Presidential Committee on Electricity. And we spent weeks and months going through producing a very detailed report as to what needs to be done to the power sector. And for me, it's such a shame because unfortunately, the way that report was implemented left much to be desired. As such that today we are still the same kind of problems. Now, something also that really doesn't allow success in government is lack of accountability. People are not held responsible for not achieving results. And that's why, as Minister of National Planning, I started the Ministerial Performance Report. And we gave targets to ministers. Everybody had a target. The Power Minister, for example, one of his targets was to reduce a national collapse of the system by a certain period and completely eliminate it. Now, and the consequence of not achieving that was that he will be thrown out as a minister. Unfortunately, again, shortly after we started implementing that, I left office. So this government luckily has restored that. We had in the piece of news that was just read now that the president is probably going to use the latest report that has been produced by the management agency to guide his cabinet reshuffle.
I mean, one area that I think is very important for a lot of our viewers, the government where you served was blamed about debt management, having to consolidate much on the future of Nigeria by savings. The governors also had their own differences as to the commonwealth of the nation. And the governors forum was so influential at the time. They said, bring all the money, let us put it on the table. There are a lot of differences that the federative unit had with the central government at the time. But there are conversations that also at the time as to our refineries not working. There are no electricity is a major problem. Fundamental question as to productivity of the nation and the problem of revenue. This was also very much when you were in office. But if you look at the economy of today, if you try to diffuse and dissect all of those issues, we might not be able to live here today. But if you look at the problem of the country today in terms of the economy, what would you say is the place or the moment where this government is probably getting things wrong, and what can they do to get it right?
Okay, before I answer your question directly, let me say that people underestimate the amount of cooperation that is achieved between the federal government and the state governments, particularly through the National Economic Council and similar agencies. As Minister of National Planning, we were the secretariat of that Economic Council. Yes, from time to time there are some disagreements, but I think it's a very, very good avenue for actually bringing everybody to the table, discussing issues passionately, and arriving at consensus. So I think the disagreements that people talk about between the federal government and the state government is sometimes honestly exaggerated. And those, the discussion there is generally apolitical because people come from different political parties. But when, the committee sits, at least from my experience of it, is usually trying to achieve what is in the best interest of Nigeria by cooperating at different government levels. Now, coming to the economy and what you say this government needs to do, I think for me is really that I don't see it as failing to do anything or not achieving things, as more of certain things need to be done a bit more. And I think in that regard, I would say that, especially having been finance minister and having been also in the central bank, where at one time I was the deputy governor in charge of the monetary policy side. So I've experienced both sides. I would say that the governor of the central bank needs to be supported with more action on the fiscal side. There's a limit. Monetary policy has a limit. You can tighten up like they've continued to do. You can increase interest rates. You can do all of those. The effect will be there. It will help to control inflation some bit. But if the fiscal side is actually not pulling its own weight and not being supportive enough, then clearly that can cause a problem. Now, I know, for example, there's a lot of effort going on to raise more revenue, to examine expenditure, cut costs. But I think a little bit more needs to be done on that side in order to complement monetary policy and achieve greater success.
Dr. Shamsuddin Usman, I understand that you're probably launching this book or presenting it to the public tomorrow. I wish you the very best. It's good to read your thoughts about some of the things that you faced in office. Some of us who report some of those things when you were in office, now we get clarity on some of the reasons why you took those decisions, but it's good for the public to know. And also those who are in office right now, it's good for them to be able to have a sense on how to handle these public offices better. Dr. Shamsuddin Usman is the former Minister of National Planning and former Minister of Finance. Thank you so much indeed for your time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Sheil.